Okay, y'all, so welcome back to my channel. I wanted to touch on the importance of protecting your pregnancy. I wrote an article for Refinery 29 about how I survived postpartum depression and heartbreak. And I thought it was important to just talk a little bit about that journey. I don't necessarily want to talk about everything in the article. I'll link the article in the description and you can read it at your own leisure. And while I'll touch on some of the things I experienced in the article, I more so wanted to just stress the importance of protecting your pregnancy. Whether your pregnancy came by surprise or it was planned, the state of your emotional and physical health is optimal as far as you caring for yourself and your child. And a lot of women need to focus on making sure that their bodies and minds are prepared pre-pregnancy. I don't think a lot of people think about that. It's like, okay, let me try to get pregnant and do what I need to do. But there is a lot that you need to consider pre-pregnancy. And the emotional toll that I endured while I was pregnant probably caused a lot of the reason why my delivery ended up going how it was going. So just to backtrack a little bit about the pregnancy and how it came about. So when I got pregnant, it was August of 2019. I think I found out, in August of 2019. But the thing that threw everything off was that I also found out literally 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant that my ex-husband had been cheating on me the entire marriage, right? So immediately that put me in a state of emotional turmoil. I was super, super, super upset about that and hurt and all the things. So at that point, our marriage was rocky, right? It was rocky from the very beginning, and likely because the cheating was always happening and I was always super close, this close to finding out. And anytime I was this close to finding out, some fight would erupt or there would be some level of deflection that would happen. And then it just got to the point where the pattern started to not make sense, and I couldn't really accept what he was telling me was happening because it just did not make sense. So I started to just pay attention to things more, and then things started to just fall in my lap as far as what was actually going on. So I get the wind of, his cheating and all and some of the details, not even all of it, but most of the detail that I could obtain at that time. And then, we're faced with, okay, so are we getting a divorce? What's happening with our marriage? Blah, 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 blah. And I don't know that it was decided immediately that we were getting a divorce. I think on his end, he was probably like, well, that's the only option that we have here, because there was no recovering from that for me. And I think he knew that. So for him, it was that. For me, I was conflicted. That was always, cheating was always a non-negotiable for me. And I'll probably touch on this in another video about infidelity and whether or not it should be a deal breaker. It all depends, but I'll talk about that separately because this is about pregnancy and protecting your pregnancy. So finding out that I was pregnant 2 weeks after was tough. It was extremely difficult. And I, at the time, didn't realize how impactful all of those things emotionally were going to be to my pregnancy. There was so many changes happening and all of the things. So I, I found out I was pregnant, and then for a few days I kind of sat on it because I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was feeling or thinking. Motherhood was always a part of the plan for me. Us having a family was always a part of the plan for us. But it was a very risky time emotionally to have a baby coming into our relationship and marriage. And it was a very volatile time. But I couldn't bring myself to not have our baby. It just was not an option. And at that point, finding out that I was pregnant, my son, became everything to me. And I wanted to ensure that I did everything to make sure that he came to this world very safely, was healthy, and that I made the decision to have him, right? So telling my husband, or telling my ex-husband at that time, was hard, because what I imagined would be the, oh my God, the excitement, that we were always planning for and all that stuff when it comes to baby planning, or family planning rather. That didn't happen. It was like immediate fear. Like, we both know we're not in a good position in our marriage. We're not solid. And while we were going to like couples therapy and doing all the things, it was just not, like everything we was trying was not working out. All my trust was gone. All of it was gone. And then some of the details that I found out about, like the cheating itself and the affair, just really catapulted like everything for me. And I just could not. But the issue was that I also wanted us to be a family. It was really weird. But going into the pregnancy in this state, already with heartbreak on top of me and heavy, was extremely hard, because I think that it's important for women to have a healthy state of mind through the pregnancy. And one thing that my therapists, both couples and my individual therapist at the time, were concerned about was all the stress that I was enduring as a result of like the affair, and who's moving out, and him being kicked out the house, and me staying in the house and still needing his support a little bit, as I go through the pregnancy, and him coming to the doctor's appointment. It was so tense, so tense, so tense. And there were moments too where there was a lot of confusion about us, like something about the baby, and then that kind of brought us together every now and again, and then some resentment will build in on either end of the equation, and then it would be like bumping heads. So there was a lot of like up and down, in between of all of the emotions. And then found out I was pregnant in August 2019, and then in December of 2019, the other woman reached out to me, and that was a whole nother invitation of conversation that I didn't necessarily, at that time I entertained it, but in hindsight, I should have never entertained it. Never, 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 never. I should have never entertained a conversation with her, because I learned later that it was all for her, it was all about like making sure that I was out the way, not necessarily like, oh my God, he's married or anything like that, because they had been together our entire marriage. So as much as she tried to say that she didn't know, she had to have known. So at the time, I feel like, it was irresponsible of me and for her to be having this conversation knowing that I was pregnant. And she's also a mother. She had a child of her own, but it didn't matter to her. She wanted whatever she wanted out of the conversation. And then me, like a dum-dum, my curiosity killed me, and I had a conversation. So all of those things were affecting my mental state and my emotional state. And I am so grateful that my pregnancy, for the most part, from a physical standpoint, was fairly smooth. Like, probably had nausea for the second trimester. First or second? No, the first trimester I had some nausea. And then the second trimester was like great. Like, I was working out, I had all this energy, I was doing all the things the second trimester. And then the third trimester was pretty decent too, towards the end, of course, like everything, like every woman. I got uncomfortable, just couldn't sleep and couldn't find the right position and things like that. But for the most part, like, my baby boy was good to me. I didn't really have a lot of aversion to food. I ate everything. So that was cool. But emotionally, that's where I suffered the most, just because there was just so much going on. And unfortunately, when I got pregnant, COVID was at the height. So July of 2019, I'm pregnant, and then March of 2020, everything shuts down. So then you already have that isolation. And I'm really curious to know, like, what the studies are going to show about, women who had babies during COVID and what that looks like, because going to doctor's appointments relatively by yourself, or not being able to, have the support around like you really need it, was difficult. And I'll say that uh, most people were cautious, didn't want to come around and things like that. But for the most part, there were like a handful of people that I felt comfortable enough being around. And thank God that I never got COVID, and people around me got it, but never like directly impacted me, which was a blessing. But still, it was those factors that also played a part. And then I wasn't able to have a traditional baby shower, right? Thankfully, I was blessed with everything that I needed. And, I had a registry and all the things, but I wasn't able to have a baby shower. So sometimes I'm like resentful of the fact that, I didn't get to have that experience. But the emotions behind all of that were really impacting how my pregnancy was going. And I just recall being very paranoid and very scared about what's to come and what life it looks like now that me and this man are pretty much dismantling everything. It's not the thing that I expected for my life and my pregnancy. I definitely didn't want a divorce, until like the cheating, was revealed. It's like, I just thought that we were going to be this family. So for that to be disappearing, for the dream to be going away, really affected me. But then his behavior was also a stressor for me, and I couldn't have him in the house anymore. Like, it was bad. Like, there were some threats made, and things, physical attempts of things were going on, and it didn't matter to him that I was pregnant in certain instances, right? So that also was very concerning as well. And back to my therapist and even our couples therapist, like, in different ways at different times, they both told me, Dina, you need to limit this stress. Like, find a way to limit this stress, because they both told me that stress, the cortisol, the stress hormone, transfers to the baby. And I didn't really think too much of it, because I'm just like, oh, whatever. And I feel like that's probably true, because towards the end of my pregnancy and then having my actual son, um, he was super like panicky and anxious. My son was, and it was really interesting to watch. And I also was the same way. So we were both feeding off of this energy. When it was just me and him by ourselves, it was great. But anytime an ex-husband was around me, it was so difficult. And I think what you need to do in order to be able to protect your pregnancy to however capacity you can, like, first, of course, like, if you have trusted people in your life that you can confide in and talk to, like, lean on them. It is the hardest thing to be going through pregnancy alone, and, working through heartbreak. It is extremely hard. And a lot of women do that. And it's just not, I wish that nobody had to go through that in pregnancy. It's such a beautiful thing. I do believe that, like, children are a blessing. And the fact that I wasn't able to just enjoy all of that without so much drama and trauma in between really saddens me sometimes. Like, sometimes I look back at that time and I'm like, damn, that's time I'm never going to be able to get back. But it was so, 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 so hard on me. And another thing that I think is important, in protecting your pregnancy, is that you have to find a stress outlet, something. For me, it was cycling. I cycle, standstill cycle, bike classes. So at that time, I was still going to the gym. I was very much like big belly pregnant, going to the gym and going through my cycle classes and all of that. So thankfully, I still have that motivation to stay active in that way. And I think that's super important. And it also helps with delivery and just everything, too. And then I think when it comes to like your spouse, unfortunately, in my situation, I wasn't able to have like a good, I don't know, conversation with him ever about my needs. It didn't matter. Like, the man did not care anything about anything that I needed. Like, I think he was just caught up in his world and anger and whatever he was feeling, that sometimes, he would like think about what I needed, and then other times it'll be like F her. You know what I'm saying? And likely resentment because like I didn't want him in the house and all the things. And I just I don't know that a lot of people really take into consideration how vulnerable pregnancy is for women. Like, we can literally lose our lives, as we're giving birth. And it's just so sad that situations happen and people make decisions, and you gotta go through the motions of those things that arise. But I wish there was just more consideration and care for life and somebody else that's bringing life into this world, that is connected to you, and that you would just leave your ish over there while this unravels and this pregnancy grows, and just hope for the best for the mother and the child. Because listen, I don't care what anybody says. Some men in my life have said like we were pregnant, like in regards to their spouse or whatever, and I'm like, no, 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 she was pregnant. And I don't want to negate that men go through things during pregnancy. For women, like, I'm sure there's fears and emotions and preparedness that, like, worries them and they have to get ready for. But the woman is the only person that's pregnant. The woman is the only person that's going through every single thing that this baby brings in utero. Like, the woman is the only person that experiences that. So while I can understand the sentiment of we were pregnant, the woman is the only one pregnant, and the woman is the only one that is going to have to carry the load, both physically and emotionally, when it comes to the connection to this child. And the I don't know how people don't understand how beautiful yet delicate that is. I don't understand that. But beyond that, when it comes to protecting your pregnancy, like, if you have good insurance, and I check everything. I did like the genetic testing and all that stuff, like before my son was even 3 months old in utero. I did everything up front just because I just want, let me know. So I checked for, like diseases or, genetic anything, chromosomes. I checked everything. And thankfully, I did have a PPO insurance, and still do, because of that, because I want to be able to have the level of care, medical care, that I need for anything that is important to me. So that's one way. The other way, like I mentioned, is make sure that you have good people around you. And if you're going through like heartbreak or trauma during your pregnancy, help people understand how they can support you. Be very explicit about what you need and let them help you. That is extremely important, because you need a village. You need a village, and you are not meant to do this by yourself, and you cannot do this by yourself. So that's another thing. And then the other part of it, like I was talking about with your significant other, find a way to get into a cordial or positive conversation about how he can support you, he or she, whomever can support you. Because if you don't voice that, then you're going to have all these expectations and all these unmet needs. And your pregnancy should be as calm as possible. I remember even like one of his family members, his sister specifically, was so concerned about my health, like mental health and well-being. And she even offered for me to like move in the house with her, because things were just so bad and I was so depressed. And it was painful for her to witness all of these things at the hand of her brother. Now, over time, I just didn't trust it, because that's her family first, and she's going to ride for her brother no matter how wrong he was in the situation. But in that moment, like, I could understand, like, even her being a mother herself, like, she was like, she told me, like, this is not healthy and I am concerned. And I'm like, I am too, but I don't know what to do. I'm not going to leave my house, da 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 da, all the things. And those instances in which he would come back to the house to either grab clothes or whatever, 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 like, just did not do me well. Because I was always super tense when he walked into that house. Like, it was so bad. And there was one time that things almost got physical and the police were this close to being called, and he had just ended up leaving the house. But the point of me sharing a lot of this is because when it came to the delivery, I think that is when the stress of everything that I was enduring during pregnancy kind of came to a halt. Like, the delivery was crazy. I labored at home as much as I could. I had a doula. I hired a doula, and she was with me throughout the whole pregnancy, and we were prepared for everything possible. And I think I labored at home for a good 22 hours before I just could not take it anymore. Like, whoa. And I did pretty well. Like, my water broke, and, we'll talk about like pregnancy and childbirth and all the things that they say is going to, like, you think is going to happen a certain way. And it's just not that dramatic in some instances. But my water broke. And then I just kept laboring at home, and it just got to a point where I just could not take it anymore. So when I get to the hospital, I was 10 centimeters dilated. And my OBGYN, she's amazing. She was just like, oh, you're going to be ready to push very soon. And I was like, oh, wow. I was super proud because I got to that point and I'm like, oh, wow, like I did good. I'm ready to push. I didn't take any medication at first. I didn't want anything. So I was just laboring and going through the contractions and all the things, just pushing through it. My ex-husband was there because of COVID. My doula couldn't be there, but she was on the phone, and then my mother couldn't be there either, which was really tough. So it was just him and I. And as you can imagine, like, we're already on the outs at odds, right? And here I am having to like lean on him for some type of support. And it just didn't feel good to have him there. And I just wish that he wasn't there. Like, looking back, I'm like, yeah. But what happened was that by the time it got to the point where this baby had to come out, I was okay. I was getting tired, but I was okay. But my son was in distress, and his heartbeat was starting to like lessen more and more. So then my OBGYN, she recommended an epidural. And I was so adamant about not getting one because I just wanted to do everything natural. Like, it was a thing. And I don't shame anybody for medicine. Like, honestly, I will pop an Excedrin or take medicine for whatever I need if I'm not feeling well. So for me, it wasn't about that. But I wanted to feel everything. I wanted to understand what my body was supposed to do. And it just got to a point where my son was in distress and his heartbeat was dropping rapidly. And then he pooped in the sack, and it just like, he got to get out. So I had to get the epidural to get ready for an emergency C-section. But when my doctor checked my, cervix, she was just like, you recoiled. So I went from 10 centimeters back to 6. So like my labor started to reverse. And I learned now after doing some research that happened because I was under so much stress and I was not comfortable and I was just not relaxed. So all that tension that I was holding in my body was likely part of the reason why my labor, reached, like, it went backwards. And I always think about like how I could have protected myself better in pregnancy. I could have, done all the things to make sure that I was mentally sound, but there was just so much trauma and drama that I just let that overpower the need for me to be be calm and even keel during the pregnancy. Thankfully, my son, he came out fine. He was a big boy, and he was the sweetest thing. And I think his birth like instantly just calmed everything for me, and I was super in love. All the things that I thought I was going to feel when he came into this world, I absolutely felt. The other part was, okay, now bringing him home and needing to depend on this man that I didn't trust, didn't like anymore, was falling out of love with, and all the things. Like, I had to lean on him to help me, and that was very choppy because he was in and out the house, and I really was there by myself a lot, and I definitely suffered some postpartum depression, which I shared in the refinery article. And all of those things were happening too. So I always think about how different ways in which I could have protected my pregnancy. And I absolutely want to give a hug to any mother out there that has to go through pregnancy by themselves and also trying to heal from heartbreak. That is very tough. Or even I've had a couple of friends like lose family members or immediate family members that are super close to them, like their mother or father, whomever, that's super close to their immediate family, and have to grieve while also bringing life into this world. And having the emotional resources, the emotional support to help you there is like, it's pivotal. Like, it's so needed. And I think that a lot of women, especially if you want to get pregnant and have a child, like, think about everything that's going on in your life and where things are, right? And I don't want you to stop or not make the decision to go forward with your pregnancy because of anything. You live your life and do what you need to do and get what you want. But also consider everything that you need to have in place in order to have your own back, right? And from an emotional, financial, physical, even like your environment, all of those things need to be considered when you are entering into this world of motherhood, and then also have to now think for another little human that is going to depend on you for everything. And I wish that I would have focused more on my son's needs via me as a mother carrying him versus all of the external things and people that were hindering my heart and my mind and like clouding a lot of my judgment at the time. And thankfully, I didn't do anything stupid like that impacted anything, but there were some thoughts and feelings and even behaviors that I probably was party to, that I probably should never have even considered, just because I was so hurt about everything that was going on around me. And I'll say this: no woman, all right, should have to go through anything that is hurting them emotionally during pregnancy. But the reality is that it happens, and it was a part of what happened to me. And a lot of women endure many things during pregnancy. So you really have to think about what your needs are. You really need to think about who you need around you, and you really need to think about like what you can depend on, right? Who's reliable in your life, who's going to show up, who loves you, right? Unconditionally, who you can count on, who you could keep it a buck with, who you can talk about with all, regarding all of the things that you're going through, so that you just have something to land on when you have those moments. Because pregnancy is scary. It is scary. It's a beautiful thing, but it is scary too. And the sole reason for me even getting an estate plan together was because I was so fearful of anything happening to me during childbirth, and nobody knowing what to do with my stuff in regards to my son's care. And I don't necessarily want my ex-husband to make that decision solely. Like, nah, like I want to make sure that there are other people that are accounted for on my documents to make sure that my son is taken care of. It just is what it is. So when it comes to protecting your pregnancy, like really, really consider all of the things that you have surrounding you. And when it comes to your partner or significant other or spouse or ex in some situations, like either go to couples therapy, individual therapy. We were doing both. And honestly, it was one-sided. The effort was really one-sided. It was one-sided on my end because he was just showing up, but he wasn't really doing anything to better the behaviors or help the situation. And there was still a lot of lies being told in therapy from him. So it wasn't getting us anywhere, but we were doing the things, right? So whatever resources you can leverage as it relates to like mental health, emotional health, leverage them from the very beginning. Leverage them before you even get pregnant. Because the preparation for what is to come, although you can't predict anything, right? And there's only so much you can prepare. At the very least, you'll have those, resources in place and you'll feel comfortable enough with them to lean on them when you need them. All right. So anyway, please be sure to check out the Refinery 29 article. Like I said, it's linked in the description, but it's a good read, especially for any woman that has gone through postpartum depression, is going through postpartum depression, or pregnant, or, it's just a good point of reference. Because for me, I just say that, part of my channel is to just make sure that I educate and share as much as I can so no one has to suffer through a lot of the things that I've suffered in this life. Like I said that in my very, very first video, and I want to be able to help. And if this video or my content resonates with you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can also find me on all the socials right here on the screen. And that's pretty much it. So I will catch you next time. Thank you so much for your time with me today. And yeah, catch you next week. Bye.